We'll also present some summation ideas about a lot of the ideas that have been presented so far.
Thank you very much. I'm about to be disintermediated, so I think I shall start living on the cloud at the moment. One of the advantages of being a last speaker is that everything that needs to be said has been said already. Most of you really want to get into a real rigorous Q&A with the speakers here. So I'm going to try and see whether there is anything new in what I have to say. Let me start by saying I look at this industry more as somebody who analyzes industries. And I look at why are we interested in understanding disintermediation. It's been talked about a lot. And the reason we are actually interested in understanding disintermediation has changed the nature of a number of industries
that we have seen. Also, disintermediation isn't like a one-time thing where suddenly some people get so-called disintermediated. Like, oh, what a wonderful word. It's really a process. It's a transition. It's a transition that ends up changing industries and changing the nature of the industries. And I think what's important is for us to try and understand what might be these changes that might happen in the publishing industry, what might be the changes that disintermediation might bring about. So that's really the kind of the reason for which we want to understand what does disintermediation do. So I think it's useful for us to try and learn from other industries. One of the industries I've been very fond of in looking at disintermediation is the whole computer hardware and software sales industry. And what we talked about is Dell's initial emergence as a great company as it disintermediated the entire retail chain and went directly to the customer. The manufacturer went to the consumer. But what we forget at times when we look at Dell is that Dell could do that. Actually, when Dell first started, it started doing it for the commercial part of the industry and not for the individual customer or individual consumer. It started doing it for corporations. 70% of Dell's sales initially was made to the corporate sector through a disintermediated process whereby they offered the corporate sector added value. Today we see a lot of the retail industry is gone. Dell and the computer industry has changed. There's so much of selling that is taking place to individuals as well as corporations. Players have re-intermediated in the process as time has gone on. Who have been these new players? Players such as logistics management companies, players such as FedEx, and other career companies that have evolved into becoming logistics management companies. And what we need to understand is, as we see an industry about to disintermediate or moving in that direction, what are some of the new players that might come in? Who are some of these new value providers that will really allow the industry to transition itself? And that's really, I think, where I would want to go a little bit with this. Look at travel agencies. They have so-called been disintermediated, but they're all in existence, large number of them anyway. They have consolidated, yes. They don't make much revenues from airline ticket sales, true, but they have moved into value-added services such as tour operators, holiday planners, vacation planners, and created new kinds of alliances that we did not think of earlier in terms of what they could do. So we want to look at the evolution or the likely evolution of the publishing industry as it disintermediates in terms of what are some of these new formations that actually might take place. Let's spend a little bit about the music industry. It has been talked about already. But one of the main issues of the changes in the music industry as it disintermediated, as electronic music and downloads became the norm and became very popular, we would see similar trajectories maybe. But what was very important was that the album was the business model. of the music industry. All of a sudden, you're downloading hit singles. So the nature of the business model had to change, and revenue could not be leveraged over a large number of chapters of books. And maybe people just wanted to download one popular chapter or two popular chapters of the book, and the book as the blockbuster book as the business model may or may not be the end result. So the transition and the transformation is something that we need to kind of try and understand a little better. And of course the question always gets asked, can we predict who will be helped and who will be hurt as the transition through disintermediation of an industry takes place? I don't think actually in some ways that disintermediation has actually taken place in this industry, and I kind of beg to have a slightly different view of it from others. What we have actually seen is the growth of an electronic distribution channel. We really haven't seen precisely the kind of disintermediation that has characterized the complete transition of major industries. Three of the underlying factors that have allowed transitions in industries that have disintermediated have been the fact that market transparency for pricing and product choice gives increased value to the customer. Okay, we have to try and understand whether or not these assumptions hold for the industry, for the publishing industry. And I'm not always sure. Inventory definitely, is a huge inventory, and ebooks really takes away the need for huge costs of inventory and makes inventory highly mobile, and that's definitely a factor. And then the whole notion of just-in-time. How important is just-in-time information? These three assumptions, where they have held, have allowed industries to really transform themselves through disintermediation. And I think we need to question some of those assumptions as we look into the industry. Once again, the traditional value chain, which our students really explain so wonderfully, the author, publisher, distributor, customer. But there's a lot of author development that takes place, and interaction in the creative process itself that moves you from being a creative writer into producing a product that is publishable. And one really hasn't understood that relationship or factored that in this whole talk about how this disintermediation is likely to take place. When we look at the publishing industry, what we see really is the growth of the e-distributor. And definitely Amazon.com has made the brick-and-mortar model, or the sole brick-and-mortar model, less successful, and the e-distribution model very well established, which allows now for the e-books and others to be distributed direct to consumer, which by the producer to the consumer, which really is the essence of a disintermediation process. So I'm just trying to understand how is this happening, and why is it has taken so long for the publishing industry to actually try to disintermediate the distribution channel and take what it has directly to the consumer. It really hasn't happened in a big way. Instead, the publishing, I found two small publishing houses, O'Reilly's and McSweeney's and others who have kind of done that, but I haven't seen that being done in a very big way as yet. And why has it taken so long, since so much of this technology has existed for some time now? So if we look at disintermediation, where are we going to see it? Is it going to be an author-publisher combination, very much like the producer of the product, that's going to sell directly to the customer? Or will they instead actually ally with a company, and it be an author-publisher and e-distribution that is going to then produce products that will go directly to the end consumer? Is that what we are going to mean when we talk about D2C? In which case, how is this combination of the author, publisher, e-distributor actually going to be affected? The re-intermediation that we can expect in this industry, especially if standardization does not take place rather quickly, is the whole notion of providers of technology platforms. And these providers of technology platforms might become a major player, and whether they will be owned by technology companies, software companies, or whether they will be part of Barnes & Noble, part of Amazon, or part of the others remains to be seen. I think there are multiple paradigms out there right now, and we really aren't getting a good sense of the direction in which the standardization process is indeed taking place. So the other option is that we have the warehousing was talked about in the previous presentation. We have the author publisher producing a product that goes in through libraries, warehouses, technology platforms as a new kind of a configuration that comes in and re-intermediates this particular industry. Moving along, I would like to move along. There is a context of disintermediation that is actually why we are talking about it so much right now. Because yes, indeed, and it's all been discussed, the change in technologies are taking place. And as a matter of fact, we look at ebook readers and platforms, but there seem to be some amazing new display and aggregation technologies that seem to be in the technology pipeline in the next few years that we really have no idea what impact they'll make and at what price they're going to come in to be able to make an impact in this whole direction of providing book-like content onto an individual customer. They talked about, and I see it as a very important thing, we've discussed the economics of ebooks
as to why it actually becomes very profitable. There is also a lot of incentive among lots of publishers to proactively try to grow the ebook segment, and those are usually factors that tell us as industry analysts that indeed an industry is moving in that particular direction of disintermediation. The new publishing platforms, changing incentives for authors. I'm going to leave that a little open. I do not know to what extent the 10-year process is beginning to consider and accept a lot of the e-publishing as part of the incentive schemes for authors, but it is changing a bit. And the fact that already there is a growth in the direct-to-consumer market of e-books, about 7 to 15% is already being sold direct to the consumer. I think companies have to make some very big decisions here. The traditional mix of ebooks and print versus only ebooks is a big strategic decision. Whether or not there's going to be a new business model, and it's been talked about, I think Richard discussed this, what that new business model might be. Are we really just going to disintermediate with the existing business model? Is there going to be really value-added content that the ebook disintermediated publishing industry is going to provide? And what we see is, until and unless that happens, we don't see the industry actually moving in that particular direction. Go it alone or through partnerships, and that's another big decision. And of course, exiting, as the University of Missouri Press seems to have done, that we heard from Al a little while back. Timing of the response. Is this transition that the firms are going to make to be a radical change done as a shock therapy, or is it going to be a slow transition? And then the question of how much resources do we have to do that? So what I'm going to do now is by some factors that we see from analysis of other industries that seem to suggest that in industries that have these variables, the disintermediation process moves quickly, and that it actually transforms the nature of the industry. So I'm not going to go through all the items, but I'll just pick a few. Specialization in industries where companies can actually specialize on particular areas seem to be ones that move towards disintermediation, where people know how to partner, where there's been a history of doing partnerships with other companies and other parts of the value chain of the industry. There seems to be a movement in that particular direction. The whole notion of the long tail that Al talked about, the economies of abundance, where there will be millions of niches, where a couple of players might take in the bulk of the e-business, but there will be lots of other niches who are all viable.
in terms of profit making and in terms of business models. They will all be viable. So you won't see a total consolidation, but large numbers of specialized niches that would exist, where real-time pricing is a variable that can help you, they help the customers, get the customer to feel that there is value in it, that you can actually do some auction pricing as we are on and get the best product at the best price, where e-communities can be created, and where intellectual property issues are resolved. We had the whole copyright discussion, where you can actually create switching costs in the industry by involving the customer in design and production, where the website community building of ease of navigation, ease of transaction that Al had referred to earlier can be done. And very key is this trust building of the e-publishing industry. The trust building in terms of gatekeepers is that, do you trust this company in terms of the product that is coming out, in terms of the content that is coming out? It's the information overload in the publishing industry I do not think will be tolerated that easily. Where is that gatekeeping going to come from? It's very unclear at the moment if you talk about D2C, which is direct to consumer selling. And it has to come in through reputation effects. Whether those reputation effects are from reputation of publishing houses or reputation of universities or something, to be able to leverage that reputational effect and bring in the notion of gatekeeping. And finally, of course, the creation of standards. I won't go through this. This is the other dimension that we look at, minimizing transactions costs. Industries where transactions costs can actually be minimized by disintermediating, actually move fast in that particular direction. And these are search costs, information costs, bargaining costs, decision costs, etc. I'm going to skip through this because we've talked about it a bit, and I'm going to skip these two examples and move on instead to certain key success factors. The specialized reputation, ability to provide author services that go beyond a technology platform and create some value addedness for the authors themselves. And then at the other end, the customer value added in terms of whether it's multimedia, whether it's historical context, or whatever it is. And leveraging of branding, this is the reputational effect, the gatekeeping effect, where if you can have the publishing houses be able to leverage their own reputations, or the university presses being able to really connect with the larger reputation of the university and specialize in directions that the university has reputation for. And then author development is another area that will still remain to be worked at. E-learning is happening at universities, and libraries are changing the way they are. We've heard a lot about it, and that's likely to have differential impacts on different segments of the industry. What I've done in the next 3 slides is take these factors and evaluate 3 segments of the publishing industry. The segments being the scholarly book segment, which is really the research-based monograph or book, specialized book segment, the textbook segment, and the trade book segment. And interestingly, the results I've come up with are very similar to the results that have been discussed earlier on. And so what I've done here is that I've looked at all these factors and said, how many factors today in these segments are favorable to a positive and accelerated disintermediation of the industry? And what I find is that there are a large number of favorable factors when it comes to the trade books, in terms of all these dimensions that I just mentioned, and a few negatives, the negatives being intellectual property, how that's going to be monitored, whether through copyrights and stuff, or through some other form of governance that will allow an association or an industry association linked to a trade book publisher that would kind of guarantee that revenue streams could still be brought about and brought in. And then enforcement costs of your intellectual property and various other kinds of issues. These are 2 negatives I see in the trade book area. Otherwise, the trade book segment seems absolutely ready to go in for an accelerated disintermediation process. When I look at the textbook segment, I find that, again, it's There are some positives and some negatives. What this means is here, in the textbook segment, if the firms learn how to do partnering better, if the firms learn how to create specialized e-communities, if the firms learn how to involve customer into the process, into even the design process of it, to customization part of it, better than what is being done right now, saying, okay, you can have 2 chapters of a book, where you can really create value-added websites and not just instructor manuals that are set up there with some videos, but really a dynamic website that has increased the learning part, the reputation and trust-building aspects. If these can be actually improved, then this industry is also going to become ready for an accelerated disintermediation process. Scholarly books, on the other hand, seem to have a very different story, at least in my opinion. You really need to do a lot more in many of these dimensions before the scholarly books can really move into a phase where they will actually be able to be disintermediated. Having said that, however, and I won't go through all the dimensions, obviously. Having said that, I will argue that in the scholarly book segment, which is my third point out there, synergies and partnering with the other 2 segments could change what I just said. Okay, so if you look at publishing houses that have scholarly books, trade books, and textbooks, then the scholarly book segment might also be ready for a disintermediated kind of a transition. There are some facilitators for success, and I will argue that especially for university presses, and we saw with Al's presentation how libraries are becoming much more part of the presses. This whole idea of value add through creating a knowledge discourse probably will become a kind of a new value-added proposition, where a knowledge discourse that begins with actually mentoring of an author and goes right down to after the customer or the consumer gets the product, the e-book, continuing to not just update on a yearly basis, but dynamically engage a discourse on it, that might kind of build itself. And there are some other questions. Self-publishing, I do not see necessarily, unless there is a whole licensing system that develops, that becomes like a standard in the industry for self-publishing, that acts like a virtual gatekeeper, and therefore allows some kind of an accreditation that says, okay, this book, although self-published, has been vetted for quality in these following ways. Because one of the biggest problems with this disintermediated industry is that anyone can access it, all kinds of stuff can come out, and we need to create those systems of gatekeepers that would work with that. The library as the new intermediary with e-learning platforms integrating specialized community building is something that I see happening. And eventually, rather than a disintermediated notion, I actually go back to Richard's comment on stakeholders. I think all of us in the business school, we believe in stakeholder theory, although we also believe in achieving the mission. And I think what will emerge is a network as opposed to a cleanly disintegrated industry. So I'm going to end there. Thank you.